Welcome back to another episode of Broke Up, Not Broken. If you're going through a divorce, don't worry, you're not alone. This is your one-stop shop for mastering your life and your finances throughout the entire divorce process. Today, I'm super excited to have Marcus with us. Marcus is a communications coach for parents of preteens, those somewhere in the ages between 10 and 14 years old, to support them to effectively show up and connect with their preteen during these key formative years in order to secure a relationship that lasts beyond a lifetime. Marcus especially finds joy in supporting multicultural families who communicate across generational and cultural divides. He has served internationally, this is awesome, in East Asia, Europe, Southeast Asia, Middle East, South America. You've been all over the world, man, for the last 20 years. He supports parents so they can show up and maintain a meaningful relationship with their child during these naturally identity-breaking years. They know the value of doing hard things and want to be present with their son or daughter before it's too late to bridge that gap. So listen, if you're feeling overwhelmed by your divorce or your current station in life, please don't be. Marcus is here to help us break it down so you can feel confident and prepared by creating a clearer picture of not only your financial situation, but how you can tackle some of the personal challenges that you might be facing through this process. So grab a cup of coffee or your beverage of choice, buckle up, and let's get you once again financially and personally empowered. Marcus, so great to have you with us, man.
Jamie, it's wonderful to be here. It's that was beautifully read. I felt like a newscaster.
Wow.
It's
I should
wonderful.
maybe I'm in
Yes.
the wrong line of work here, but I'm just
I'm thinking.
I'm just a lowly financial planner who focuses on helping people navigate the financial nuances of divorce. That's just my thing, man. But I appreciate you
With a
being
smooth
here.
voice. Yeah.
Thanks, brother. Thanks, man. So listen, I'm incredibly interested in this conversation because I have a 12-year-old who was very young when I have a 12-year-old when she was very young when I started my divorce back in 2007. She was 3 turning 4. So it's been a few years, man. And I was thinking about her leading up to this conversation because and in our lead up to this conversation with you, one of the things we talked about was how malleable and how impressionable kids are in their preteen years. And my son, Jack, who was he was probably 10 or 11 or so during the divorce. He really had a hard time. He had an okay time with in some aspects of it, and he had a really difficult time with it in others. But then I look at my youngest, who was only 4 at the time, and she was kind of like, oh, I get 2 Christmases, I get 2 birthdays, I get this is awesome. Why didn't we do this sooner? So talk to me a little bit, I guess, first off, how did you get into this line of work? Because I'd love to hear about your story, but speak to that. Help me understand, how these kids are absorbing all that's going on and some of the things that they're dealing with with the divorce.
Sure. So, my parents were actually divorced when I was 11. Yeah. Now, my mother's from the Philippines. My father's from the Bahamas. They met in Nebraska, of all places.
There's no beach in Nebraska.
Yeah, right? None whatsoever. And they're both from the islands on the 2 sides of the world.
Yeah.
I was born in California. I grew up in Alabama some time of my life. Yeah. Then I moved to the Bahamas when I was 12, and I finished college in Alabama. Oh, man, I'm all about. That's why I love dealing with multicultural families, multi-generational families too, as my work has been abroad. So I got my communications degree, journalism, and straightway went to South Korea, where I was actually a missionary teacher. Always had a connection with the divine. It wasn't burdensome or so on. I say in Korea, my understanding of spirituality grew, and I stopped being a missionary, but loved teaching, loved connecting with people. That's where I moved to Saudi Arabia, taught there for some time with a petrol company, taught in Thailand and Spain. And really the work that I do is human development. It is communication. It is connecting with people. And every context is a new puzzle, let's say. And the idea with divorce. So to your second question, that's a little bit about me. Just at the context there. Mm-hmm. To your second question of how do kids deal with it? First of all, every individual is different. We know that, just as you saw with your son and with your daughter. Every kid is a universe unto themselves. And with different needs, different wants, different desires, and different identities and how they're approaching it, especially at the developmental phase. The reason I deal with preteens is because that's when they have their first identity breaking, as you read. And what that means is their role is changing, their new expectations, and there's leaning into their sense of identity, which is starting to pull away from the parents and starting to explore other avenues. And this was easier done before social media.
Yeah.
We could get into that later. But when a kid is going through tumultuous times and there's a backdrop of, depending on how the parents approach it, of more turbulence, it's really hard to find an anchor. And really the work that I do at a deeper level that I do is trust building. That's why we establish it during this time so that you can hold that trust through those teenage years. I'm sorry, if my math is right, that puts your son at about 18 now or so?
Yeah, exactly right. He'll be 18 at the end of the year.
Yeah. So the work we do is moving them from dependence to independence to ideally interdependence. And that's where they can be a member of society to give back. But that's when they start to figure out their own identity, their own understanding in it. I wouldn't want to make this into an exploratory session, but I mean, how did you notice his development over teenage years? Because I mean, that divorce was tough for him. You said
it was very tough for him. It was very strange, man. And I appreciate you asking the question. I am an open book, so hopefully listeners that are listening are okay with me, kind of diving into this, because it's not really financial, but I want people to understand like where we're coming from and the experiences I've had, because other people out there are probably in my shoes. The first few years he was fine. He seemed to be very fine with it. He ultimately gained a stepbrother and a stepsister over the years, and they have an amazing relationship. They're friends on social media, and they text one another, and they're always checking in on one another, and we've gone on. Everybody's gone on vacations together, and when they're all together, here at the house, it's an amazing experience. And then over the course of the last couple of years, as he's gotten to that 15, 16, and now we're staring down 18. That shifted a little bit. I mean, because all the kids have started to grow a little bit older now, and they have, my oldest is in college and she has a job, and then the stepbrothers, stepsisters, it's boyfriends and girlfriends and work and college, and their kids they're busy now. They have a life, and he's still in high school. So there's they're now at this different level than he is. And maybe there's been a little bit of that, like, I'm not necessarily in that same social circle stage of life. Right. So I think that's changed him a little bit. And it started off, it was a 10 to start off. And now it's like a solid 6.
Okay. And when you say it, you mean in like the agitation, the anxiousness, or the...
Yeah, I think so.
Turbulence, yeah.
I mean, we have a great relationship, and I mean, he knows I love him to death, and we all love him very much. But there's that, and I don't think it's just him. I think it's a lot of kids in that age. And I remember being, 17, 18 years old myself, and just dealing with the fact of, oh my gosh, I have one more year of being able to kind of cruise and have fun with my friends and my friends and whatnot. And then high school is behind me, and the real world is going to slap me in the face. And there's some anxiousness and scariness that, the nervousness that goes along with that too. Right.
Yeah. This is life. So to touch on a few points and then tied into finances, when we go through transitions, that's when we are more attentive. That's when we learn our lessons about living and life. And the first one at preteens is the first I call breaking, but it's the first time, we're expected to be something different. And that's why if we teach them these skills when the stakes are lower, they can learn principles and skills at this age. If to tie it to finances, I remember I had a friend who he's financially independent, but his kid was being silly with a few dollars, and then he wanted some more, and his father was like, no. And another friend was just like, why don't you just give it to him? It's nothing to you. He says, I need to teach him these principles while he's young, when the stakes are lower. So when he gets older, he has to deal with more. He knows what it means. Every stage has particular needs or particular desires. And when you can anticipate them, you know how to meet them. The work that I do is through conversation, usually with boys. They clam up because they don't want to be a burden on other people. I have ideas of how he probably could have cocooned or how he probably could have ventured out. I love that he had siblings there, even step siblings, yeah. But then I would have had strategies and tactics of how to help him process those things in conversation. And that's what I do with the show up framework. Also, how you discuss stress with him. I would have talked about that with you as a parent if we were working together. And because my whole thing is communication of what they need at this stage and what at this age. So that's generally what the work that I do. It's beautiful that you have some sense of awareness, like you could see it, and you seem pretty dialed in and tuned into your kid. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I'm not perfect by any stretch, but parenting is challenging in and of itself. And I think what I did notice with him when the divorce was about to start to like gain momentum, there was a lot of concern over the financial aspect, and that he was in tune to that early on. So as a parent, how do you effectively communicate with preteens about the potential change that's brought in by the financial changes that are brought about by divorce? How much do you give them information on what is safe to share, what is not? What do you think you should, when you should hold back? What does that look like?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm actually doing a series on LinkedIn these days over the next 2 weeks. And if you don't see the series, you can come to my website later on to look at it. But even if you don't come to me, there's a book called 14 Conversations to Have by 14. And one of the chapters is money. Even before that, it doesn't say exactly what to say, but it gives frameworks on how to talk about certain things. There's the idea of oversharing, and that you don't want to be the burden on the kid. You don't want them to become anxious by you being anxious. So I work with the parents. And the whole idea, I say it's a metaphor. It's kind of like helping you put your mask on first so that you can get some understanding of how to present it. Remember, every communication is towards a purpose. So you have to think, why am I sharing with them? Why am I sharing this with them? And oftentimes that is to be open with them or to let them know they're a part of this family and to expect changes. Because if we expect stressors to come, we're able to meet them. So you do want to be around the kitchen table to let them understand that there will be changes. And in that, you also want to communicate, as with all divorce, you're not the reason and purpose of this change, but these are adult decisions that we're making. So there's not you to blame. And then this is a little step further, but one, their understanding their feelings of the change. And if there is a way in which they're showing up, affecting how they're dealing with life. In preteens, we're trying to invite them more into autonomy, so then giving them opportunities to come up with a solution for it. Now, in regards to finance, how does that look? I really never thought about it this deeply, this niche, until you brought it up to me. Another book I would recommend, though, is The Value Creation Kid. But that speaks about a holistic family. But it's working into your kid, their contribution and their values to the family as a whole. But that's a good finance book for kids. As it relates to divorce, that's a beautiful question. I think I answered your question about how much should you disclose. What other unique questions do you think would come up in regards to finance with a divorce?
Well, I mean, I think they recognize that there's going to always be there's going to be a change, right? And you and I talked about this, kind of leading up to our call here today. They're no longer going to be in a household with maybe a dual income family, right?
Yeah.
Or those dual incomes will now become single income households, and they might have to leave their family home and move to an apartment, or downsize their home. They may have to move to a whole new city, new state, new country, who knows? And I think that's the thing that keeps these kids up at night. And I'll just share with you too, Mark, my own parents' divorce. I was 7 or 8 years old. I think I was 7 or 8 years old. And I remember specifically knowing that this divorce was taking place. And my best friend growing up, he and his family brought us over a box of groceries so we could put food in our pantry. And I can, as I'm telling you the story, I've told the story a bunch in other discussions with clients and friends and other podcasts that I've been on. Mm-hmm. And I remember the box landing on the counter. And in that moment, I remembered, this is heavy. Right. This is, and I knew then that I
Hmm.
never wanted my kids to feel that same level of stress that I did at 7 or 8 years old, watch my parents go through it. Because my parents, they worked their rear end off to try to keep a roof over our heads. With my
Yeah.
dad was working multiple jobs, and my mom worked multiple jobs, just because now there were two households that had to be supported. And that's
Yeah.
what really prompted me to get into the world of finance. I
Beautiful.
never wanted my kids to
Yeah.
ever have that same experience. So I wanted to learn about money and managing money and budgeting and cash flow and how to build a business and all these, like, that's what really propelled me to do the work that I do. And then my own divorce propelled me to do this work that I do as a financial planner, focusing on divorce. And so I really just think that they don't truly grasp, because they don't teach you this stuff in school. They don't teach you they teach you
Yeah.
whatever they
You're
teach you.
right.
They're not teaching you, they may teach you a little bit of like general budgeting and things like that, but they're not the really important stuff that all of us as adults need to know about managing our finances, investments, and so on and so forth. They
Hmm.
don't teach you that stuff at school. So how does a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old wrap their head around this without that level of education? And then now they're worried about, how are we going to keep the lights on?
So let me see where the intersection is here, and correct me if I'm wrong. And thank you for sharing your story. Because as you were saying that, I remember, yeah, I had to move to the Bahamas. My mother stayed in California when my parents divorced. And the reason I did move with my father is because my mother was a stay-at-home mom. She had to figure out life then. And my father could afford to, and he asked for me to come, right? And I remember being a teacher several times, students bringing to school that anxiety, and you see it on their face. The intersection for me is managing emotions and relationships and managing finances. And in our context, we're speaking about divorce, as that's your profession. But how do you have this conversation with a kid of, our financial situation is changing, and this is what I need you to know about it? Beautiful question. Can we approach with that? Like in that
Absolutely.
context, does that sound good to you?
Absolutely. And my,
Yeah. All right. All right.
and I want you
Be,
to, I want you to add a little more to it, right? The lack of education around it and how we can fix that, right? Is there anything we can do to
yeah.
help educate the kids, right?
Well, I just wanted to set it up right. Well, and I'm approaching this from my expertise of emotions,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
when I say emotions, emotions are indicators of, are subjectively, how is our outside world? What is our understanding of our outside world? And am I safe and secure here? And can I expand and so on? The nickels and dimes of it, I'll leave that to you, as that's your level of expertise, right? But then when parents are talking about the bottom line, I think we have to be careful of not, and this is hard. It's hard to say, because I know these are real life questions, but you don't want to put the burden of emotions on your kid, right? And that doesn't mean hide them. You do want to let them know that things are going to change. There are transitions around here. And us as parents, as older people, as adults in their life, we know that we roll through the changes. Hope is actually a scientific word. It means you see a better outcome on the end. You know you have agency to bring it about, and you know you're able to take the next step. That's actually the scientific definition of hope. Be hopeful in it. Surround yourself with support. But I hear me saying this, and I still remember my parents breaking down, because that's what happens during these times. I do also say, everything that eventually grows must first break. And I think families that go through transitions like this, they have those conversations earlier. And it's, how do we teach our kids how to have these difficult conversations without them thinking they are the reasons for the conversation, one, and they're responsible for coming up with a solution. And maybe not all of it, Never be the source of threat towards your kid. And some parents need to hear that, some parents don't. But never let your kid feel as if they're the reason for your frustration. And that's just a general rule. And like I mentioned before, when the snow has settled in the snow globe, you might need to give yourself some distance of having this conversation with the kid. But when you guys are settled, invite them into the conversation. Invite their voice in. That's what it means to be autonomy supportive parenting. You're recognizing their knowledge and their experience, their feelings in it, and giving them voice of maybe an idea of how to navigate things can let them feel a part of the solution. And that's one aspect of my show up framework. The H is hold space for collaborative thinking and critical thinking. But it's, how do we navigate this together? This is a you problem as a parent. And when you have a you problem, you don't expect other people to solve it. But you don't want to you want to be clear in your communication that your kid is not the source of that problem and they're not responsible for solving it. Yeah. How do you
It's
feel with that
awesome,
answer?
man. I love it. I love it. And I know this is, supposed to, for our listeners, it's supposed to be a financial show. We're trying to do our best to intertwine this, but some of the stuff that we deal with, a lot of the clients that we work with
Finance is emotional.
it's very, very emotional, and you have to be able to be very pragmatic, and you have to try to keep the kids out of it. And you have to be, I don't know. I say it all the time. Like, you have to be the CEO of your life in these cases as you're going through this process, and you've got to know how much to share and how much you want to hold back with these kids. And I'm just like fascinated by the work that you do, because we're not, me personally, I'm not trained in that type of work, and I know a lot of our listeners don't understand how to handle it either, because you've got a lot of spinning plates and there's a lot going on, and you had to get little Joey to soccer practice and little Susie to ballet, and your boss was ragging on you all day long, and now you're getting a divorce, and how you're going to make ends meet. And it's easy to not be able to just take that pause and just say, okay, like, this is a me problem. This is not my kid's problem. How do I better handle this? So yeah. I mean, there's a lot to glean here. Now, one of the things that I think probably a little bit of myself in this, and when I'm thinking back to when I was like 10 or 12, my parents had gone through this divorce. They were divorced. There was a little bit of, anger about the change and the circumstance. Yeah. And I was, God bless my father, because I was kind of a jerk to him for many, many years. Yeah. And, we've since reconciled, and he's an amazing man, and involved in my life very much now. It's like, it's been great these last, 20 or 30 years that we've had that relationship, but it wasn't always the case. So yeah. How do parents handle that emotional conflict? Like, what are some of the tips and tricks that you can give them to help manage that anger that the kid might be feeling?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, and I'm not trying to sweep it under the rug, but every context is different. So I'll speak in generalities and ideas. Yeah. Life is about miscommunication too. That's where a lot of the rub is. Even when we are clear in our communication, it can be received differently. And especially kids who are new to the communication game, they don't know the nuances. A furrow in the brow might even seem like anger, and they might, for lack of a better word, pop off at you. And then that starts escalating things. They're asking, why are you angry at me? And you're thinking in your head, I just got gas right now. This is not even directed at you or something, So being mindful, first of all, of all the myriad of things it could possibly mean. One thing I tell parents, or I share with parents, is from positive psychology of the 3 Ps. It's not personal, it's not permanent, and it's not pervasive. It's not in all things. When you understand this parenting thing is for the long haul, you give yourself more grace in the moment. That's one. So then things become less tense when you understand how long of a runway you have. Now, that said, you can also double down on this and just like investing, accrue over time. If you're building on trust, you're either building trust or you're eroding it. I do have strategies. Or like tactics, actual specific frameworks that we can look at when I speak about opening up communication. However, I'm thinking of a general strategy and approach of it now. Like now there are small things that we can do, such as when a kid's angry, oftentimes there's resentment because they don't feel as if they can express themselves, or when they express themselves, they're misunderstood. Resent means again, and sent comes from the Latin sentar, meaning to feel. They feel it again because they can't get it out of themselves. There's a blockage and it's just right here. And that's why they resent you. Figuring out a way for your kid to express themselves could be through writing. For boys, oftentimes it is through activity. Could be in shared moments, cooking, or it could be a regular time where you meet, like a walk around the block, and you let them have some control over what's done during that time, like a ritual. There's a moment where they get to decompress, ritualized. We call that you time. So there are different ways in which are built into my framework of how the kid can eventually learn to express themselves. But as a parent, you have to model it. That's what I was thinking about with your father as you were explaining your story. One thing I remember about my parents when they were going through their divorce, they never spoke bad about the other parent to us. They kept it between them. For me, that showed me, yeah, this is their issue. And it didn't create head funk for me thinking about the other parent. That's one thing I always encourage anybody who's going through a divorce or anything of the sort. Let the person form their own opinions on what they observe. And of course, if I respect your wisdom, if there's something you need to tell your kid to keep them safe. But don't speak disparagingly in general about the character of the other person who's raising your kid. I think with the context that I have, that's the best I could do at the moment. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. I mean, your last words there make me think about a lot of the cases that we're dealing with. And I tell people all the time, and if you're in the throes of it and you're listening to this right now and you really just want to, it makes you feel good to throw the other parent under the bus. I get it. I mean, I've been there, I mean, especially with my highly conflicted divorce, but the thing you need to try to remember all the time is that whatever you say, text, email, whatever, can be used against you in the court of law. And the last thing you want to do is have, your nasty text messages put up on a projector screen in the family court for all the public to see, because it is an open forum for the public, and see what you said in text message about your soon-to-be ex-spouse. We don't want that to happen. So, and it protects the kids too. So I again, man, I could talk about this stuff all day long with you. I think this is an incredibly important topic. I think even we've been doing this around 30 minutes now, and I've gleaned so much good information from you. So if people want to reach out to you and maybe get some help from you from a coaching perspective and really just help them, get through this, how do people get in touch with you? What's the best way for them to do that?
Thank you. Yeah. And first, thank you for this conversation. Thank you. Thank you. I'm over at LinkedIn. That's where I'm doing my workshops. Not so much on the other social networks, but I'm building up. Or on marcushiggs.com. That's where you'll find me. You can reach out to me there. But look out for me on LinkedIn. You can reach out there. The groups and pods that I am putting together, I'm trying to get people we parent in pods. It's called allo parenting. That's how we're supposed to come together. And we need to find our tribes. So thank you for putting this on my radar, because this is a very specialized type of support. Every tribe needs a different type of support. And thank you for the work you're doing out there. Yeah.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. We will, if you're driving, listening to this, don't pull over or anything. We're going to make sure we have all of the proper links and all the links to Marcus's LinkedIn, so you can access more information about his workshops that are coming up. We're recording this in July. This is probably going to launch sometime in October. You do workshops throughout the course of the year, like every quarter or so.
Yeah.
Is that how this works?
I'll have evergreen workshops on my website, as well as
Nice.
their rolling workshops. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, and I thank you all for tuning into today's episode. We hope the insights that we've shared tonight have provided valuable guidance on navigating the complexities of divorce, especially when it comes to communicating with your children and managing the financial adjustments that they're facing. So remember, you're not alone in this journey. For more resources and expert advice, visit our website at allegiantds.com. If today's discussion sparked your interest, don't hesitate to reach out to Marcus for a personalized consultation. And for more, visit his website and the links that I'm going to put in the episode notes. It's all there for the taking. So thank you again for joining us. And until next time, keep moving forward and building a financially and personally empowered future.